everybody, welcome back to La La Land, and today I'm going to be telling you everything I read in 2020. So I'm excited. Let's get started. Okay, so I'm just simply going to be sharing with you all of the books that I read and finished in 2020. So there were some books that I started to read, but I didn't finish. So I'm only going to be telling you guys what I finished in 2020. So first off, we have 100 Cupboards. I made a review for this. I did all sorts. This was the first book that I really read, and it's the first book I can remember reading. I started keeping track of reading, and this was the very first one that was on the list. So basically, this book is about a boy who goes to live with his aunt and uncle and cousins, and he discovers all of these cupboards on his wall that lead to different worlds. And it's a really good book. It's a really exciting story. It's one of my favorites. I love it so much. I think I gave it 4.5 stars just because I knew that the series gets better and better, but it's just a really good book and I really suggest reading it, and this was the first book I finished of 2020. So the second book I read in 2020 was The False Prince, and this was probably one of my favorite books of 2020. I gave it 5 stars. I love it so much. It's so good. I'm starting the second one. I'm so excited. Basically, this is about, in this imaginary land, obviously, it's a fantasy. There's basically, this man is collecting orphans, and he's going to try to pass them off as the royal prince because the royal family has been killed. And so he's going to try to trick kind of the kingdom and royals into believing that he found the real prince. And so it basically follows one of the orphans who is picked for this and kind of what he has to do to survive during this whole thing. And it's so good. I loved it so much. When I was reading this book, I could not put it down. I read it so fast. It was so amazing. I loved it. I gave it 5 stars. It completely deserves them. It was so good, such a good read. I really recommend it. So, third on the list, and one that I just uploaded a review for, was The Ranger's Apprentice Book 1, The Ruins of Gorlan. This book, I sort of started reading last summer, and I DNF'd it, and I picked it back up, and I really enjoyed it. I started reading it the day I finished The False Prince, so I was still so caught up in that, so I kind of had a little bias against this one. I believe I gave it 3.5 stars, so there was nothing, it wasn't bad or anything, but I said that I really think this series, it's going to become one of my favorites. This basically follows, it's like a fantasy book too. It basically follows an orphan, again, a lot of orphans in books these days. And he lives in this castle where when you turn I think it's 15, you all of the craft masters kind of choose an apprentice, so you can be a diplomat or a soldier, or you get to be trained as all these different things. And I don't want to give away the story, but also in this world there are rangers who serve the king, they protect the land. They're really cool, and it's basically just following Will, the orphan's main storyline, and it's a really good book. I gave it 3.5, which might seem small to some, but it was honestly a really good read. I really enjoyed it, and yeah, it was really good. So next up we have Joseph, which I also did a review for, a 30-minute long review. And it was basically me just gushing about the book the whole time. This was so good. It was so good. I gave this book 5 stars because it was amazing and I loved it so much. So basically this is a book following the storyline of Joseph from, the Bible, and basically it was just kind of like his storyline, and there's so much detail and work, and just the author just went above and beyond. She, like I said, if you look in these books, she has ways to pronounce Egyptian words. She has cultural notes and historic notes telling you all about these things you may not understand. She went to Egypt, and just a lot of time when either with historic things or biblical things, when they're retold, they just don't feel right in the place. This felt like this was ancient Egypt with Joseph. It was so real and it was so good. I loved the characters. The storyline was just, obviously the storyline's great anyway, but it did a really good job bringing it to life, and it was just a really amazing book. I gave it 5 stars. It's amazing. It's fantastic. You should read it. Okay. Next up was David, Yahweh's Chosen. This is by the same author, Terry L. Fivash. I really doubt that I'm saying that correctly. This one is very similar to Joseph. It follows the storyline of David instead of Joseph, basically. This one was really good too. It had a lot of cultural notes, it had a lot of historic notes, it had a lot of detail. The characters were fantastic. I loved them. The relationships in this book are amazing. The storyline is great. It's fantastic. Oh, you know what? I didn't give you the storyline for Joseph. Let me give you the storyline for Joseph. The story. Hey guys, it's Future Me again. I'm just popping in to give you guys a different, better description for Joseph, because the last one wasn't so great. So the storyline of Joseph is set in biblical times. It follows the story of Joseph, if you guys know what that is. If you don't, basically, we start out with Joseph being sort of a bit of a brat. He has it all. Everything's going super well in his life until his brothers sell him into slavery, which just obviously devastates him. And it's just sort of his story of coming to terms with all of the horrible things that happened to him in his life, and how he sees new cultures and places, and how he decides just to do his best to help the people around him, no matter who they are, whether they're above him or below him. And it's just a really powerful, moving story, and he has a bit of a power arc too in it. And it's just a really great story, and you guys should read it. All right, back to Past Me. So back to David, what this storyline is about is kind of confusing to explain if you don't know the storyline. I can tell you the story of David. They stretch the story of David out over 6 or 7 books. So the first book is basically about a shepherd boy. He guards his father's sheep, and he can play this really beautiful music. And basically, he's called into the castle kingdom place to try to help the king with his music. And he kind of befriends the royal family along the way. It's a horrible description. It's really good. It's really amazing. I gave it 4 stars. It's fantastic. You should read it. Go find a better description, because I promise you there is one. David 2, Yahweh's Warrior. This book I also did a review for and also gushed about it a ton because it was amazing. I gave this book 5 stars because it was fantastic. This one is basically, obviously I don't want to like tell you the storyline since it just, without trying to spoil everything for people who haven't read the second one, the story continues of David. Seriously, no, it's about him. Yeah, no, I can't tell you this without, like, giving away everything that happens in book 1. So basically, it's a continuation of David finishing his story. And oh my gosh, this book is amazing. The characters, Terry L. Favash, I'm so sorry I'm pronouncing your name wrong, because I probably am, is so good at writing books. Like, there's not an element, I can't find an element that she's, like, weak in. Like, her characters are incredibly real. The decisions they make are real. You feel like you can reach out and touch them. Real. Her relationships are some of the best I've read. They just are so good. She writes action and fight scenes well. She writes just humor well. Her world building is amazing, especially like when you're trying to, like, it's a very big accomplishment if you're able to construct a just world out of nothing, like in fantasy books. And it's a whole other thing to try to learn history and be able to write a book that's true to that time. And she did an amazing job with that. And just, she's amazing, and these books are amazing. And this is a 5-star book, and it's amazing. You should read it. So next we have The Hunger Games. I finally started reading them. Okay, but I actually didn't read them. I listened to them on audiobook. We just happened to have the book so I can hold it. But since I did listen to an audiobook, I might just put a picture here because I didn't actually read them. I'm sorry, I know. So, hey guys, so this is future me coming to talk to you. I just simply wanted to give a little bit of a different description for you guys who haven't read or heard of this book. The description I gave was for people who had. It's a little more funny, a little more brutal. But for you guys who haven't heard or read this book, basically it takes place in a dystopian future where sort of the land and everything has been split into 12 districts, and then there's the capital. And the districts are a lot poorer and the capital is kind of richer, which sort of led to a rebellion on the district's part that happened in the past, and they lost. And now there is the Hunger Games sort of as their punishment, where every year 2 people, 1 boy, 1 girl, are chosen from each of the 12 districts and are sent to this arena where they have to battle and survive the elements, and they have to battle each other, and only one of them is allowed to win. So that's basically sort of what the book is about. The people sort of in the Hunger Games. It's not like morbid or anything, but I just sort of wanted to give you guys a little bit of a different description. The one that I do have up here, it's kind of more for people who've read it. It's a little more funny, a little more kind of brutal, honestly, but I hope you guys enjoy it. And I just want to say this was a really good book. All right, back to past me. Basically, The Hunger Games are about a dystopian novel, I believe, and it's basically about there's rich people and there's poor people, and every year the poor people have there's one of them chosen, 2 of them chosen actually, 1 boy, 1 girl, and they all go, and there's like different sections of poor people, and all the chosen people from the poor people go and have to kill each other for one of them to win, and they get to live the rest of their life, and the rich people watch. That is basically what the book is about. Yeah, it sounds horrible when I say it, but yeah, that's basically the plot of the storyline. I'm kind of toying with either giving this book like 4.3 stars or 3.8 stars. I'm not sure yet. because I did know a lot of spoilers for this book, and I was gonna do a review for this book, but I haven't. But I think I'm going to give it 4.3 because it was a pretty good book. I just simply kind of knew some of the things that were going to happen. Katniss, which is the main person we follow, is a very unique main character, I want to say, because she's much more of a cold, rigid main character. And I don't mean that as in sort of like the tropey, cold, rigid main character. She's just a much more, like, some things are like very typical, but other things are just like, oh, that's kind of new. Everything in this book was like really good. I feel like most people know what this book is about, so I don't want to like go on and on about it. But it's a pretty good book. I enjoyed it. I read it all really fast. Not read it, I listened to it all, and it's like over 10 hours, so commitment to a cause. But seriously, no, the characters were good, the world building was good, the actions and decisions characters made sense. It was an interesting story. It was a cool world. I enjoyed it. So I have to quick backtrack for a minute. I read A Wrinkle in Time. Well, actually, I read this over the course of like 3 months, but I finished it between Joseph and David. And I also made a review for this book, and you can watch it. I gave it, basically what this book is about is, honestly, I don't even know. I don't even know what this book was about. It's about 2 siblings and their friend, and they go and try to rescue the sibling's dad. And it's a sci-fi, it's a classic, it's weird. There's a lot of really cool, interesting elements in this book. I just think they weren't executed to the amount I would have liked. At some points, I was really gripped and I was like, oh my gosh, this is so cool, this is so interesting. And other points, I was just like, kind of with the main character. She was a little annoying to me. I'm sorry. I'm sorry, Meg. I'm sorry. I gave this book, I think I said 3 overall if like I took the 2 things that bothered me out, but I did end up giving it 2.3 stars. So yeah, and I think this is a novella, and there's a few novellas that come after it. I might try reading those. I don't know. I'm not sure. But yeah, so I read this one too. So, next thing I read was Catching Fire. Again, I read it by audiobook, so we're switching to the picture here. And oh, this book was great. I did know just a few tiny little spoilers for this one, but it didn't matter because it was so good. I gave this book, I believe, 5 stars, and there are a couple books that I did actually write reviews for. I just simply never filmed and published them. So you might still see a review pop up of these. I'm not sure if I'm going to do them anymore because it's been a really long time since I read them. But basically what this one is about is... Oh, I can't do this. I'll spoil it again. Basically, it's about what happens in the next Hunger Games. That's all I'm gonna say. I think that this book was I enjoyed it more than the first book. I enjoyed the relationships and the characters and the storyline a little more, and it was just a really good book. I really enjoyed it. I give it 5 stars. Super fantastic. You should read it or listen to it because the audiobook was great too. So the next thing I read was The Yellow Wallpaper, and I don't actually have a rating for this because I need to read this again. It's only like 23 pages, but there was a lot of happening in those 23 pages. Actually, there's a lot happening in like 5 pages, and the rest was all just sort of like nothing happening. But this book, short story, is basically about a lady who, as a medical prescription, has to stay in a room and do nothing, and all she can do is look at the yellow wallpaper. And apparently this was like an actual medical prescription, not the yellow wallpaper, but just like doing nothing and sitting in a room. And a lady actually wrote this book based off of her experience, and that kind of the storyline and what happened to her. Basically, some doctors stopped prescribing this thing, and it had a really crazy ending that I need to read again because it was kind of nuts. So I'm gonna read it again and get back to you, but it was just a very interesting book, so you guys should check it out. The next thing I read was The Tragedy of Pudd'nhead Wilson. This book I read for my literature class, and I have some conflicting feelings about it. For this book, I should have actually just read the description for you guys, but... Hey guys, so this is future me again, and I'm just going to give you guys a little bit more of a clearer sort of description for this book. So it follows kind of like 4 people. It's set in the first half of the 19th century, and it takes place on this town on the banks of Mississippi. So the first kind of person it follows is this lawyer who's just moved to this small town, and he's very smart, but everyone in town just kind of writes him off as an idiot. And then the second part of the story the second person it follows is a slave named Roxy who is white passing. And then the 2 other people it follows are these 2 children. One is the child of Roxy, and the other is a different child. And basically what happens is Roxy switches the 2 children, so it follows them and just sort of everyone through the years and what happens. And that's kind of the storyline of the book. Part of me found this book really interesting and really just, sometimes I was just really just gripped by it. And I was like, this is really interesting. Other times, it really wasn't, and it was just very, very, very long paragraphs of the author, like the narrator, telling me what people were doing. And so I was thinking about giving this book like a 2.5 or a 3. I really don't know. Like, kind of in that area. I'm not going to put a specific dot on this one. But it was a really interesting book, and it was definitely very interesting, yeah. The next book I read was War of the Worlds by H.G. Wells, also for my literature class. This book is basically about... I actually don't know what time period this book is in. I was trying to figure out so hard when I was reading this book when this was in, but I couldn't. They use wagons and stuff, so I want to say like, yeah, I don't know actually. I envisioned like 19th, 18th century stuff. I don't know. Basically, but yeah, no, that doesn't seem right either. Maybe like the 50s? I don't know. Anyway, it's about aliens coming to Earth. That's pretty much the entire premise of the plot. It's aliens coming to Earth, and they are not friendly, and everyone's just simply trying... It follows a guy who's trying to survive. This book, I too had conflicting feelings with this book. There was some points where I really enjoyed this book, where the emotions of the character were just so incredibly real. I could feel them, and I really I felt like I was really in the story, and the creations that H.G. Wells made, I could really see them. He like invented some, like the term heat ray and stuff, and just the images of the aliens, and he just had a very clear image that you could see, and some of his scenes were just so, you could just see the picture in your head, and it was like watching a movie in your brain. There were such clear images, and at times it was just so interesting. I enjoyed reading some of these scenes so much. It was so good. And then other times it was very slow and very just pluggish, sort of, which is going to happen with any book. You're going to have really interesting scenes and scenes that aren't as interesting, but just sort of, there was a large section of the book that was just nothing happening, sort of. Stuff happened, but it just wasn't that interesting. At the end of the book, there wasn't that much resolve for like a few characters. You just had no idea what happened to them. I'm giving it like 3.5. That seems like a lot, actually. Maybe like a 3? 3.2? Okay. I might pop in the future and tell you what I actually decided on. But this was a really interesting book. I enjoyed it quite a lot. I found a lot of the things really interesting. I listened to the radio drama, and oh my gosh, if you guys listen to the radio drama, a lot of people, when they were listening to the radio drama, actually thought that it was real and started freaking out. And I can see why, because me listening to it now was like, this is really real. Like, it was very well done. And so it's a very interesting story. You guys should check it out. The next book I read was The Sweetness at the Bottom of the Pie. This is a mystery book, and it basically, it follows Flavia, which I actually don't think I'm pronouncing that correctly, but I'm okay with that. It follows Flavia, who is a rude brat, basically. Rude brat who's obsessed with chemistry, and someone dies in her backyard. And so she's trying to figure out who killed them, how they died, and everything. I think she's 11 years old. And I did write a review for this one. I don't know if I'll publish it either. But this was a very interesting book. It actually took me a while to read this book because I was reading other books and I had like tons of stuff going on. So I did have to take kind of large breaks, so I wasn't able to enjoy the story as much, where I'd be like, wait, who's this character again? But for the most part, I was able to get the large picture, and it was really interesting. There were a lot of insanely big words I had to look up, but it was a very interesting book, very interesting characters. The kind of plot, like I know, like, oh, trying to discover someone who murdered someone, not original at all, but it used very original elements that often you don't like see sort of in mystery books. Like, oh, I wouldn't really suspect that to be sort of like, I can't say that actually. But no, this was a good book. I enjoy mysteries. I enjoyed this book. It was fun tagging along with Flavia the whole time. I think I'm gonna give this book 5 stars, 3.7 stars, not 5 stars, my bad, 3.7 or 4 stars. It was really interesting. I really enjoyed it, and the character was very unique, but also very, like, I don't know, she's lovable, but in a horrible way. She's so not sadistic, like, has a very dark sense of humor at times. I kind of want to say, if anyone's ever read the Artemis Fowl series, she's kind of like, she reminds me a little of like Artemis in sort of like the first book a little bit. But yeah, so this is a very interesting, this is a very good book. You guys should read it. So the next book I read was And Every Day The Way Home Gets Longer and Longer, which is actually a novella, and it's by Fredrik Backman, and I actually didn't read it, I listened to it on Audible. I'm not going to give you a rating for this book because when I listened to it on Audible, there are a few things that confused me with like scenes. So I'm going to try to reread it in book form, which I just bought and I'm so happy. So I'm going to read it in book form and then then I'll get back to you guys. But this book is so beautiful. It is a beautiful story. And I'm not saying beautiful as in like, oh my gosh, the places they went. No, the storyline is beautiful. It's sad, it's touching, it's beautiful. And I don't really know how to describe this story. Basically, it's kind of a grandfather with Alzheimer's trying to figure out how to say goodbye to his grandson and kind of explain what's going on to his grandson. And it's such a beautiful, touching story, and I loved it so much. I almost cried at the end. There were tears welling up in my eyes. It was so beautiful. I can't give it a rating right now because I want to reread it and just find the things that I was confused about. It was kind of like with scenes and stuff, but it is a beautiful, beautiful book, and you guys should definitely read it. I've heard that Fredrik Backman is a great author. So next up, I read Peter Pan, and I'm not going to give you a rating for this one either, because I have a lot of conflicting feelings about this. So basically, you guys all know the story of Peter Pan. Basically, Wendy and her two brothers go to Neverland with Peter. Sorry about that, guys. My storage filled up, and for a moment I almost lost the video. That would have been horrible. I think it's still there though. Okay, so basically back to Peter Pan. This is basically about Wendy and her two brothers go to Neverland with Peter and Tinkerbell, and they live in Neverland and they fight Captain Hook and all this stuff. Part of me really liked this book because it was so whimsical and just, I don't know, it was a really good story. I liked Peter Pan. I know some people don't, but I liked Peter Pan, and it was a very cute, I don't want to say cute, very whimsical, nice story. The part that was very conflicting was the fact that this story also, it'll not discuss topics, but it'll have very, I don't want to say like deep, like hard topics, but at the same time very deep, thought-provoking things, and it'll just blatantly just throw it at you, and then it'll just leave it, and then you're just sort of sitting there just like, what just happened? And so I was constantly like being like, whimsical. Oh my gosh. Oh no. Oh, and just think about something for like an hour. And so it was like a really hard read for me, actually. You wouldn't think this would be such a difficult read, but it actually was. Like, it was like a very hard read for me because it would just have very just thought-provoking, deep, hard things just kind of thrown in there about multiple subjects. Nothing like too like deep, but deep. And so it was kind of hard for me to read, actually, which I wasn't expecting. So I'm not gonna give a rating for this. I'd say maybe like, I don't know. Yeah. You guys should check it out. So the next book I read, or actually was read aloud to me, was The Christmas Box. I knew from the moment this was picked up and decided to be read aloud that it was going to be sad and tragic because it said touching, and that basically translates to sad and tragic. And boy, was I right. This story was really good. I wasn't expecting it to be this good, but it was. Apparently, the guy who wrote this only like made 100 copies and like gave it to like family members and No, it was like made 20 copies or something, and only like gave it to like family members and close friends as their like Christmas present, and he like gave it to them like a couple weeks ahead or something, and like by Christmas over 100 people had read it and loved it. And it's such a good story. It's such a touching story. Basically what it's about is these two parents and their kid, obviously, move in with this elderly woman who kind of needs house tenants. And it's a really touching story. I cried like the last 3 chapters through. Just tears all the way down my face. It was a really beautiful, really touching story. It was really good. You guys should definitely read it. Obviously, Christmas is over, but this should definitely be on your list for next year, okay? It was really good. The next book I read was The Boy, the Mole, the Fox, and the Horse, which I got for Christmas, or Christmas Eve actually, and I proceeded to immediately read. And it was really good. I was so excited for this book, and I'm really happy I have it now. So this book, I don't really know how to describe this book. It follows a boy, a mole, a fox, and a horse. But it's just a very beautiful book, and it teaches you kind of about kindness and love and what really matters in life. And well, it has absolutely beautiful illustrations, just gorgeous. And I noticed if you just read through it, it's kind of like, so I kind of played around with the best way to read this book, and I discovered that if you just read the book on its own, it's great, don't get me wrong. But sort of you have to follow the pictures, because the pictures are half of the story, and then the like words just kind of feel like just sort of thoughts sort of spread out there. However, I also listened to they made like an audiobook version, and this is illustrated and read in the audiobook by the author. And guys, you have to read the audiobook, listen to the audiobook, because it's probably, I am like a connoisseur of audiobooks, because as a child, instead of reading books, I just listened to audiobooks. And so like I'm very picky when it comes to like, is this a good audiobook? Is this not a good audiobook? This was one of the best audiobooks. And it's not really an audiobook. It was one of the most beautiful audiobooks. Because, oh my gosh. Well, first of all, the author did a great job narrating. Also, what he did, his purpose for making the audiobook was for people who couldn't see the pictures or read the lines. He wanted them to be able to still enjoy the story. So he sort of takes the illustrations and puts them to words. And that really helps sort of tie the story in together. Kind of a few times when I was reading it, I'm like, okay, I think this is what is going on. But just the audiobook, him telling it, also it was just beautiful. It would have sort of music in the background sometimes, or like rushing river. It was a beautiful book. It was a beautiful audiobook. And I found the best way was I read along with the audiobook, and it was so beautiful. It's a touching story. I think this got like Book of the Year or something. I don't know. I'll put it somewhere here, whatever it got award. But it's an amazing, touching, beautiful, beautiful book, and you guys should definitely read it. So the last book that I read this year was, well, I didn't actually read it. This was read aloud to me again. Was The Best Christmas Pageant Ever, which is an amazing Christmas book, and if you guys have never read it, you have to, because this book is hilarious. It basically follows in like a small town. There's this group of siblings. I can't remember how many there are, maybe 5, and they are awful. They are mean and horrible and bullies and just rotten. And somehow, through a stream of events, they end up playing all the main characters in the church's annual nativity play, Christmas pageant. And so it's just a hilarious story. It's got a really, behind all the humor, a really beautiful message. And it's a great Christmas book, and you guys should definitely check it out because it's fantastic. So those are all the books I finished and read in 2020. I did start a few books. I started Ranger's Apprentice 2, I started The Runaway King, and I started A Deadly Chapter, which I don't know. I'm gonna try to finish that up. Christmas season is getting kind of slow. But, so, I read in total 18 books. 2 of those were read aloud to me. 3 of those were audiobooks. And actually, there were 3 I read and listened to at the same time. And I read 13 books, which for me is a huge just accomplishment because I don't do a lot of reading. So this was really great. The genres that I read is I had 2 fiction, 3 historical fiction, 1 fiction / short story, 4 fantasy fictions, 2 dystopian fictions, 1 science fiction, which I feel like now that I think about it, I had 2 science fictions. A Wrinkle in Time. Guess I only had 1. Oh, War of the Worlds. I want to say War of the Worlds was a science fiction. I'm going to say 2 science fictions. I had 1 psychological fiction, which was And Every Day the Way Home Gets Longer and Longer, which I think would also count as literary fiction, if you guys know that term better. I had 1 mystery. I had 1 satire, which was the classification for The Tragedy of Pudd'nhead Wilson, which I don't know what the definition of a satire is, but if it doesn't fit, I might just stick another word up here. And I had 1 comic / self-help, which was The Boy, the Mole, the Fox, and the Horse, which I want to say that is more just a beautiful story. Yeah. So I read in book form 3,547 pages, which is amazing. I'm so proud of myself. And then if we include people reading aloud to me, that's 4,171. If we include all the audiobooks that I listened to, that's 5,093. Oh wait, no, sorry. This one was read along. The second one's read along. The next one is being read out loud is 5,301. And if I include the books that I didn't finish, just because this is the amount of pages I read all year, that's 5,390. And the time in my audiobooks, in case you guys were wondering, was from the audiobooks that I read was 22 hours and 75 minutes, and reading along with the audiobooks, I had 34 hours and 12 minutes. So overall, I think I did a really great job reading more and just doing more stuff, and I'm personally really proud of myself. I'm going to try to continue reading more and doing more stuff. I think I was gonna shoot for 12 books in 2021 to read 12 books, but seeing as the fact that I read 18 books here, and a few of them were audiobooks, a few of them were like classics or something, I'm gonna try 20 books, which I'm actually really scared I'm not gonna get to, but I'm gonna challenge myself to do 20 books in 2021. Maybe I should do 21 books. No, 20 books. Yeah. So that is everything I read in 2020. Thank you guys so much for watching. Thank you for tagging along. As always, please subscribe, ring the bell, comment below. Tell me guys what you read. Tell me if you've read any of the books and if you like them. And always leave a like, because I like you guys too. You guys have a wonderful day. Thank you so much for wondering, and I'll see you guys next time in La La Land. Bye!